Good evening, councillors, staff and visitors. Welcome to tonight's council meeting. I'll read the disclaimer. The City of Swan disclaims any liability for any loss arising from any person or body relying on any statement, discussion, recommendation or decision made during this meeting. Where an application for approval, a licence or the like is considered or determined during this meeting, the City warns that neither the applicant nor any other person or body should rely upon the discussion or determination until written notice of either an approval or the conditions which relate to it or the refusal of the application has been issued by the City. Please note that this meeting is being live streamed. The recording will also be archived and made available on the Council's website after the meeting. If you choose to participate during the meeting, during public question time or public statement time, it is assumed that your consent has been given for the audio to be recorded. Please keep your comments respectful to Council and other members of the public. Visual images of the public will not be captured. Conditions of entry: no electronic, visual or audio recording or transmitting device or instrument is permitted to be used. A person who breaches this provision of the City of Swan Meeting Procedure Local Law 2019 will be required to immediately leave the premises. Attendances and apologies. Leave of absence, I have nil, although there was one from Councillor Scanlon, I believe.
Mr. Scanlon's not present, Mr. Mayor, but she was starting from today, so perhaps she is an apology.
Okay. Everyone's apology. Declarations of financial, proximity interest and interest affecting impartiality were a further one.
Just a membership incorporated association.
So you're declaring it on C1.2, is it?
Yes.
Okay. Any others, councillors? Thank you. Public question time. Questions and answers recorded in the minutes of the meeting may be summarised in accordance with the Local Government Act Administration Regulations 1996. Questions and answers marked with an asterisk have been amended, either for the purpose of summarising, e.g. removing preamble, statements, etc., or editing. 5.1, questions for which were taken on notice. We have a question from Mr Carlos Picardo, Ms Viola Marapovi, which have been answered. You've got those answers, I guess. 5.2, questions relating to reports contained in the agenda. 5.2.1, questions taken with due notice have been given. I have nil. 5.2.2, questions without due notice, and I have a number of people wishing to ask questions on the agenda. And firstly is Mr Graham Jukic. You certainly don't look like Mr Jukic, Mr McQueen. Okay, and will you be asking questions for both Yukic's?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Mr McQueen.
No, you need to turn it on, Mr. Speaker.
And you need to turn the microphone on too, please.
Is that better, Mr Mayor? Members of the Council. Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have three questions. They're all short. They won't take long. The first is to ask whether Council and councillors have received and considered the letter from Lavin, which I authored, dated the 16th of November 2020. That's my first question. The second question is whether the Council has considered, as part of its deliberations, or will consider as part of its deliberations, the argument which I pose in that letter, namely my view that in addition to the reasons for refusal in the RAR report, there's an additional ground of refusal open to Council, and that is that the land use isn't capable of being approved because it's a prohibited use. So my second question is whether that argument's been taken into account, whether Council will debate it. And the third question is if the Council has any questions of me in light of the letter of 16 November, I'm here to assist by answering those questions. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Okay, first in regards to the letter, I can answer that personally on behalf of myself, and I'll say yes. If I've received it, I assume every other councillor has received that letter also. In regards to 2, which is additional information you provided, I suggest that Council will have to move an amendment to have that included. So no one has done so at this point in time. And questions of Mr McLean, well, I think this is public question time, not councillor's question time. So
thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Mr McQueen. Any other questions without notice? No, thank you. Questions relating, other questions. Questions 5.3.1 for which due notice has been given. I have questions and answers from Ms Karen Mowat, Mrs Naomi Jenkin, and that's it. 5.3 3.2 questions without notice. And Ms Maripodi, you have some questions. Firstly, do they relate to Paradise Keys?
Yes.
Okay, Councillor Congat is leaving the room.
What?
Thank you, Ms Maripodi.
With regard to the answers to my questions that were taken on notice, I've read them, but it's completely irrelevant because that was to do with the revocation motion that was acted on the 21st and then the carryover to the 28th of October. So giving me answers now is pretty useless when you've already voted on the revocation. Sorry. So my answer now is my questions now are how putting questions on notice was obviously a tactic by the council to silence me. So how can a councillor successfully have a revocation motion passed without being knowledgeable enough to answer questions about key issues at hand? So my first question, at the last meeting, Councillor McNamara misinformed council before voting took place by stating that, and I quote, "Not once did they bring up the issue of leaving the south side of Paradise Keys as a reserve," end of quote. This is definitely an untrue statement that may have affected the outcome of the voting
Ms
process
Maripodi,
at that meeting.
this is a question, so not a deputation, so can you please ask your questions?
If I ask the question, it would sound pretty stupid unless I actually inform you of what happened.
Perhaps you should
I've
put them
nearly
in writing,
finished.
'cause
I've
you've got
nearly
a
finished
bigger
anyway.
preamble in the question.
I've nearly finished. Many times Mitchell and I, Crocker and I, mentioned that the south side of Paradise Keys was previously public open space and recreational, and even quoted from many reports that should never be built on. So my question to Councillor McNamara is, can you be seen to be providing good governance if you make a false statement to sway councillors to support your motion and you are unable to answer simple questions from the public prior to a vote?
Thank you. Any further questions, Ms Maripodi?
I have another two. Not once before voting did council discuss the real issue at hand, being the impact of building a high-density aged care facility on conservation category wetlands and on an Aboriginal heritage site. Instead, watching the replay just showed how ill-prepared some councillors were. One councillor was under the impression that the southern side of Paradise Keys was still being left as public open space, while another was unfamiliar with the map they held and queried an area of bushland which was not even part of the City of Swan. Not to mention the lengthy discussion about a potential playground which had never been discussed over the past year and a
Ms
half.
Maripodi, can you get to your question, please?
Nearly there. The key issue, in our view, has always been the protection, not the development of these wetlands. So my question is, how can the revocation motion outcome still be valid when there were so many obvious flaws in the process that night?
Taken on notice. Thank you.
Third and final question. On the 3rd of June 2020, Council did make a commendable decision to revert this land on the southern side of Paradise Keys back to public open space, yet immediately backflipped on this very decision. We question whether Council really did intend to carry this first motion through. Once again, shows that the decisions made in this Council seem to be impulsive, flippant and ever-changing, qualities which do not represent a productive Council. So my question is, do you see this as another example of overall failure to provide good governance?
No, I'll take your question on notice. Thank you. Any further questions?
Thank you. Thank you.
It takes us to 6, public statement time. I have no public statement. I do have Councillor Richardson wishing to... Can you make sure your microphone's on, please, Councillor Richardson? And can someone recall Councillor Conklin? Thank you, Councillor Zanino.
I advise this meeting that 2 complaints were made to the Local Government Standards Panel in which it was alleged that I contravened Regulation 7.1b of the Local Government Rules of Conduct Regulations 2007 WA when I aggressively used my position as a councillor to try and gain unauthorised access to an annual general meeting of the Ellenbrook Community Collective held on the 4th of February 2020. The panel found that by behaving in this manner I committed 2 breaches of Regulation 7.1b of the Local Government Rules of Conduct Regulations 2007. I accept that I should not have acted in such a manner, and I apologise to Mr Peter McLean, Mr Timothy Clark and the other persons preventing access to the meeting, and to the members of the Ellenbrook Community Collective who were present at the meeting for having done so.
Thank you, Councillor Richardson. Item 7 is petitions. Any petitions, Mr CEO?
Mr Mayor, I have a petition signed by 12 people. Basically, Mr Mayor, there's a proposal to develop a childcare at 7 Fauntleroy Street in Guildford, and 12 petitioners are against that, Mr Mayor.
Councillor McNamara, I believe you too have a petition.
Yeah, I've got a petition, Mr Mayor, for Honda Net. It was taken up early and I was to hand it in at the last meeting of council. So Honda Net with regard to Paradise Deeds and
Thank you.
the subdivision.
Okay. Any further petitions? No. Can I move that those petitions be accepted? Move Councillor Nacino. Seconded Councillor McCulloch. No one against. Thank you very much. Deputation has been done. Announcements by the presiding member. Ko Wujak Nunga Budja. Welcome to Noongar Country. Last week at the NIDAC Week, we recognised the special place that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders hold in our community. I was pleased to be invited to a number of events, including the flag-raising ceremony here in Midland and several other local festivities. A big thank you to all the staff and community members who drive these great community activities which aim to bring us all closer together. I also acknowledge the progressive work of the Water Corporation, Community Arts Network and the City of Swan in delivering a fantastic new splash of colour on the old pump station on Bridge Street in Guildford. I've been down there recently and the artwork is vibrant, relevant and exciting. The City of Swan gracefully received commendation in the Public Health Advocacy Institute WA Local Government Policy Awards 2020 for our work in the area of climate change. The City's Sustainable Environmental team have provided a wide range of educational opportunities to residents in a fun and engaging way. Some examples of our work include 13 Thinking Green community and youth workshops teaching a range of skills from seed collecting to bike maintenance, even constructing a recyclable scarecrow with messages attached. The City also provides a very successful worm farm subsidy to help residents to deal with household waste. Congratulations to City staff under the leadership of Mr Bishop and Mr Foley. Well done. Weepier Park in Midland is now open for visitors. This is the first park in the City of Swan's new junction development. I encourage you all to explore the grassed area and a dedicated youth zone, including a climbing wall, basketball hoops and lush green lawn. And finally, the 2021 community calendar is currently being printed and will be available from the 11th of December. This edition celebrates the City of Swan's diverse history and commemorates our local history. You can pick up a copy of the calendar from any of the City of Swan libraries, Swan Active facilities, place offices and the Administration Centre, as well as a host of other collection points. You can go online and see the complete list of pick-up locations. There is another one. To community and councillors, a big thank you for your perseverance during this uncertain time. There have been lots of changes in response to COVID and they happen at a lightning speed. Just as WA started to open up, we have had again to respond to a rapid changing situation. We've seen the reality of community spread rear its head in Adelaide, which is certainly a reminder to us all that we need to remain vigilant and to continue practice good hygiene and social distancing. 10.1 is members' questions. Answers to questions which are taken on notice, we have nil. 10.2, questions of which due notice has been given. There are a number of questions from Councillor Johnson. Councillor Johnson, you have got those answers. 10.3, questions which...
No. Wait. Finish.
Well, no, because that's next. Questions which due notice has not been given. There's some questions and answers there from Carissa Parry. Any other questions from councillors? Councillor McNamara, you're first.
Page got Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, I've got that too.
Yeah. My apologies to Councillor Convitt, I've been running in and out. And my question is, has the City commenced the expression of interest process for the aged care facility at Ballajura, and if not, when will this commence?
Mr CEO.
I'll take it on notice, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Other questions? Councillor Kiley, I think you had your hand up.
Thank you, Mayor. My question, first of all, relates to the piggery in Bullsbrook. It was deferred at the last council meeting. I'm wondering if we had a response from DEWA on that was sought through Mr Russell.
Mr Russell.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I've made inquiries. No, we've still not had a meaningful response from DEWA on the inquiries on the Gaston Road or the other premises in Ellenbrook Road.
Can I ask, additionally, where does that leave the application, given we are beyond the period in which it would be, it could be a deemed refusal? Is there any update on that at all?
Through Mr Mayor, the intention is for staff to represent the item to the December meeting with information in the report to the effect of what I've just given here this evening, that we have not had any response from DEWA to answer the queries posed in the deferral with respect to history of a piggery on this site or a history of piggery on Ellenbrook Road.
And further, Mr Mayor, on another issue, item 4.6, we had a late submission from Lavin, which was referred to by an earlier speaker. I just wondered whether it's appropriate now to get some recommendation on point 23 in that letter that was submitted to us, and whether that would be an applicable reason for refusal to add into 4.6. Maybe I should give a little bit of time to look into that, or I'm happy to take an answer now if that's all right.
Mr Russell, can you answer that?
I can, Mr Mayor, thank you. Look, councillors, the RA report deals in detail with the submission made by Lavin on behalf of Mr Ukic, and it doesn't conclude that the proper characterisation of any facet of the development is that of a hospital, nor that of aged care, and the arguments are outlined in the RA. So if the request is for an opinion as to whether or not that is a valid reason of refusal, the council may make any such recommendation to the JDAP it sees fit, and of course the JDAP may take its own legal opinion on the question of the use classification, but it is not composed in the office's report or recommendation to council.
If it is of the opinion of this council, however, that would be a suitable reason for refusal, would it be of any detriment to council if it came to be dealt with at SAT?
Through Mr Mayor, of course, it's obvious that the council will not be defending any decision made by the Metro Outer JDAP, whether a refusal or otherwise.
Thank you. And Mayor, I will withdraw that item for an inclusion of an additional point for refusal. Item 4.6.
We already have a motion from Councillor Parry on that one. Who's someone? Has that one been withdrawn already?
He withdrew it. Has he? He's withdrawn it, Mr Mayor. Sorry.
Okay.
That's fine.
I'm sorry, who's withdrawn it?
There was. No one has. I thought there was a previous one, but
There was
you wish to add that in. Okay, all right. We'll make a note of that.
Thank you.
Henderson, you're next.
Thank you, Mayor. Have Main Roads responded to our request for the noise measurements report conducted on Bullsbrook residents' properties as a result of the noisy Northlink road service north of Morella Road?
Mr Caton.
Through you, Mr Mayor, the report has been completed. We understand that Main Roads are currently meeting with the people who made complaints. Following that process, at a future time, the report will be made publicly available and put on the Main Roads website.
Councillor John, do you have a question?
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions, Mr Mayor. First one relates to the Bitutech decision. I've been advised by a local resident that there are 2 bitumen tanks remaining at Bitutech, and I wonder if, through you, Mr Mayor, Mr Russell could explain why there are still bitumen tanks remaining at Bitutech.
Mr Russell.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The simple answer to that is because those bitumen tanks have been approved. And they've been approved under the approval issued for a transport depot. And it's possible to store materials that are transported by a transport depot, namely a bitumen tanker, within the tanks. And the approval was very clear and explicit in its condition that says that you cannot process the bitumen by way of heating, mixing or anything alike that is activities captured in the definition of the general or the industry definition. So it is orthodox and lawful for Bitutek to maintain bitumen storage tanks on the premises, and in point of fact to transfer bitumen from tankers into the tanks and the reverse. It is not lawful for them under the condition imposed for them to do anything more than the mere transferal of the bitumen. They can't process it, they can't eat it, they can't do any of those activities the like that are captured in the general industry definition.
Thank you very much. And just one more. My question is unusually about 8.1, Mr Mayor, in which Councillor Parry has declared an indirect interest and he'd need to leave the room. But then the question is to Councillor Parry, can you explain why you have an indirect financial interest in 8.1, which is a report to Council without a decision about the reconstruction of the Cleanaway facility?
Councillor Parry, you wish to answer that?
Yes, I will. Unfortunately, I can't because I have a commercial in confidence with my company as signed by my contract, but also the fact Miss Albright is aware of it. So if you don't mind, you can pass her that answer, please.
Finished?
I don't think that quite answers it, Mr Mayor. So if it's confidential, can we go behind closed doors to get the answer? Because that sounds like the old secret business.
Well, it's not secret at all. Can you please, Mr Mayor, can you ask Miss Albright why it is an indirect financial interest, please? Thank you.
Miss Albright, if you could just explain it. Thank you.
Through you, Mr Mayor. An indirect financial interest in a matter can be established if a councillor or a person who is closely associated to a councillor has a financial relationship and then also has a matter before the council. For Councillor Parry, his employer has a financial relationship with Cleanaway. His employer is a closely associated person to him, and therefore he has an indirect financial interest in any matter to do with Cleanaway. In terms of the item not having a decision before council, the Act talks about participating in discussion on an item as well as making voting or making a decision on an item, which is why Councillor Parry has made a declaration.
Thank you. I've got a question here. It says that the matter must... I've got information from the department. It says the matter must be capable of being dealt with by the local government, such as by giving an approval or rejecting a recommendation, and we're not able to do that. All we're doing is we've just got the item on the agenda. So there's no decision to be made here. All we're doing is reading it, and Councillor Parry's already read it. So it can't declare an interest in it because there's no decision to be made. And the second point to make is there has to be a reasonable expectation of a financial gain or loss, and I don't believe such a thing exists, because if you're concerned about a fire causing further impacts on your employer, there's no reasonable expectation of that. So I don't think there is a financial interest, indirect or otherwise.
Well, Councillor Parry's declared it indirect financial. Ms Albright's given you an explanation. I think the question's been answered. Councillor Carley.
But just one more question. Does Councillor Parry understand there are consequences under 5.2(1) of the Local Government Act?
Mr Mayor, I've been given advice by Miss Albright, also external legal as well. Unfortunately, I will follow the legal advice that I've been provided, and that's all I've got to say about the matter. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Carley.
Thank you, Mayor. Item C, 3.6, Food Organics and Garden Organics FOGO system implementation. I'm just wondering why that is being dealt with behind closed doors. Can I get an explanation on that item? Thank you.
Mr Coates.
The section of the report that is confidential relates to the prospective gate fees that are in the report, the gate fees that are being expected, because the EMRC will shortly be going out to tender, and we don't want to signal to the market the gate fee, and have specifically requested that it remain confidential. But that's the only aspect that is confidential.
Any further questions, Councillor, before we move on? Thank you. And I note Councillor Johnson also had questions in that segment which have been answered. Leave of absence, Mr CEO.
Mr Mayor, two listed there by Councillor Scanlon from the 18th of November to the 16th of December. Councillor Podovnik from the 16th of December until the 12th of January. Councillor Lucas from the 17th of December until the 10th of January as well, Mr Mayor.
Okay. Any others, councillors? Councillor Congerton. 10th of December, to inclusive, Monday. Okay. Any others? Okay, can I move that those leave be accepted? Moved Councillor Parry, seconded Councillor Jones. Anyone against? Declare that carried. Confirmation of minutes, the resolution required to confirm the minutes of the 18th of November 2020 council meeting.
No. That's not right, Mr Mayor.
Well, that's what it says here.
21st of October it should be, Mr Mayor. Sorry.
Okay, that should be amended to the 21st of October
21st
2020.
of October, yep.
Okay. With that amendment, Councillor Parry and the seconder. Councillor McNamara. Okay. Business left over from the previous meeting. We go to item 13.4, which is
Mr Mayor.
Mr Mayor, from memory, the 21st of October carried over to the 28th of October. Will their minutes be adopted from that meeting as well?
It's all part of the
same meeting.
Same meeting. Right.
Thank you.
Okay, back to where we were. 13.4, the Flora Protection Policy, and Councillor Parry.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. My motion is that Council resolve to incorporate suitable text into the City of Swan local planning scheme to ensure a fauna management plan is required for relevant structure plan subdivision and or bulk earthwork applications. Number 2, develop a fauna management local planning policy giving due consideration to the City of Wanneroo's fauna policy to give further definition to the requirements of a fauna management plan required under the City of Swan local planning scheme text and a subsequent fauna management process. 3, bring the draft policy back to a council briefing session for review before proceeding to an council agenda. And the reason for changing the officer's recommendation is by giving due consideration to the City of Wanneroo fauna policy staff will have the benefit of a strong basis to build our fauna policy.
Seconder, Councillor Congleton. Is there anyone against? Carried. We now go to 13.5, is the adoption of the City of Swan Cycle Path Plan, and a proposed motion from Councillor Henderson.
Thank you, Mayor, councillors. Sorry it's so long, but it's the combination of 3 councillors' work. I move that Council resolve to 1, adopt the draft cycle network plan forming attachment 1 to this report with figures 4.2 shown on page 12 of attachment 1 to be replaced by the Council adopted long-term cycle network map forming attachment 3 to this report subject to the following changes. 2, replace prioritised project 5.4 Upper Swanton Angara Road Project D in the draft cycle network plan with Upper Swan to Rose Street into the Vines Crossing Ellenbrook. 3, request Council staff to advocate for recognition of the importance of the Hepburn Avenue Beach Road, North Link and Marshall Road as cycle routes to the future proposed train stations in an all relevant dealing with the Metronet Morley train line project. 4, request Department of Transport to review the priority assigned to the Hepburn Avenue Beachborough Road North Cycle Path and Marshall Road Cycle Path in the long-term cycle networking map. And part A of that is once relevant Metronet stations designed on the Morley Ellenbrook train line are complete, and again B, when an outcome on the planning investigation areas as identified in the North East Sub-Region Framework Plan for the area north east of Bellagio is known. Number 5, request the Department of Transport to include the alignment of a principal shared path between Malaga Station and Ellenbrook Station proposed along the Morley Ellenbrook train line in the long-term cycle networking map once designed on the Morley Ellenbrook train line are complete. 6, ensure that during the design and construction stages of the cycle network plan forming attachment 1 to this report, references given to the preparation of existing tree canopy within or adjacent to the cycle alignments proposed within this report. 7, note the feedback received during the advertising period for the draft cycle network plan forming attachment 2 to this report. 8, advise those that lodge submissions of the Council's decision. And the reasons for the change of officer's recommendation: 1, construction of the proposed cycle path between Upper Swan and Nangara Road should rather be progressed with the duplication of West Swan Road between Nangara Road and Great Northern Highway when that occurs. Early construction will require the cycle path infrastructure to be removed later to facilitate the duplication of the road. Facilitating the link to Rose Street instead represents more efficient use of resources. 2, to ensure existing and future residential areas have functional cycle access to the proposed Metronet train stations and associated cycle destinations. 3, to ensure the construction of a planned cycle path will be designed with due consideration of the city's urban forest strategy and will not unduly compromise existing tree canopy. This canopy cover plays an important role in ensuring amenity for all path users as well as performing numerous other important environmental functions. Thank you.
Seconder. Councillor Catalano. Is there anyone against? Okay, carried. Now move to Part P, adoption of those recommendations contained in items not withdrawn. Councillors.
Including item 4.6.
I was about to get to that, Mr CEO. With the exception of item 4.6, which is listed on page 16. Can I have a mover?
Mayor, if you wouldn't mind, items 4.4 and 4.5, I just want my objection noted. I don't want to argue it or withdraw it. I just want my objection to those items noted.
Okay, move Councillor McCulloch, seconding Councillor Parry. Okay, all right. Yeah, okay. Well, I've got it listed, so that's listed for later, so it's not 8.1 comes out as well. So, okay. So, seconder, Councillor Congdon, anyone against? Thank you. Those items are now withdrawn. Takes us now to the first item, which is 4.2, the proposed amendment number 88 to the LPS 17 to rezone 8 properties along Adelaide Street, Hazelmere to special use zone and light industrial as a result of MRS amendment number 1375-27.
Mr Mayor, as this would be very complex to read out and there's almost no difference between what the officers are proposing and what is now proposed.
Just read the changes.
That is the hard part, Mr Mayor. It's very hard to work out what's changed. So I'll just explain what's changed. So the content of it's exactly the same, except for one slight change I'll come to. What's happened here is instead of having one scheme amendment, which I think was number 82, we've now got 2 scheme amendments. They're exactly the same. It's exactly the same as the previous content, only we now have 2 different scheme amendments. One for the, am I getting this right, Mr Russell? One for the west side of Stirling Crescent, north of Adelaide Street, and one for the east side of Stirling Crescent, north of Adelaide Street. The reason is that because Lot 20 is if you like, a hazardous site, that particular area is likely, its scheme amendment is likely to progress more slowly than the scheme amendment to the, let me get this right, the west. So therefore it's wise to split them up. So the content is exactly the same, it's just 2 scheme amendments instead of 1. And the change, which is to the scheme amendments to the east of Stirling Crescent and to the north of Adelaide Street, is this. It says the structure plan is to incorporate as a requirement of development or subdivision of land the provision of a 20-metre wide landscape treatment to the frontage to Adelaide Street. And I don't know if I've got a reason here, but there has to be a reason. Yeah, record the reason for changing the staff recommendation is that it is considered more practical and efficient to separate the 2 zoning areas into 2 separate scheme amendments. So other than that, there's no change.
Does everyone understand that? No. Do you want further explanation, Councillor? No. No? Okay, do I have a seconder?
I thought there was a change, Mr Mayor, on page
18.
Page 18. Structure plans incorporate requirement of development or subdivision of land. The provision for a 20-metre wide landscape treatment of the frontage of Adelaide Street.
It's the bit I read out.
Okay. Now, do I have a seconder? Councillor Kiley, is there anyone against?
Question.
Question, Councillor Henderson.
Can officers advise what percentage of the land that would take, roughly?
Mr. Russell?
Very approximately, probably in the nature of 1/5, 4/5, Mr. Mayor.
Question, Councillor McNamara.
Mayor, if the proposal or the mover of the motion has no idea himself as to the changes, then how am I expected? Will I leave the room for this particular vote?
It's up to you, Councillor.
Because I can't
You don't understand it?
Mr. Mayor, I did not at any point in my explanation say that. I said it was a complex thing to explain, and I think I correctly
Okay,
explained
I know
it.
where Councillor. If you're not comfortable, Councillor McNamara, thank you. Make a note, Councillor McNamara's that's right. Okay.
If necessary, I'll read the whole thing out.
I had a secondary in Councillor Kylie. Is there anyone against? No, declare that carried. Someone recall Councillor McNamara. Yep. Okay, that takes us to 4.6. Councillor Kylie, you wanted an addition in 4.6.
Thank
Read
you.
it out, please.
I might ask staff to read the clause 23 in the Lavin letter sent to all councillors today. Otherwise, I'll be trying to stare at my phone to get that. I wondered if Mr. Russell
do you have
could
it
read
handy
it out.
for assist Councillor Kylie?
Just to point out to yourself, Mayor and councillors, that I would like this included as a reason for refusal for the item on top of the additional items in the RAR report.
Mr. Russell, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm reading from the submission by Mr. McQueen on behalf of his client at clause 23. And this is approximate. It indicates to read along the lines of, and I'll read it verbatim, Mr. Mayor. The development application proposes a hospital land use as defined in the City of Swan Local Planning Scheme number 17, which is a prohibited use in the Swan Valley Rural Zone.
Is that what you meant?
That's all, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Russell, I have a question. Can you quantify that as in case the fact that qualifies as a hospital?
I can't, Mr. Mayor, and in fact the only party that will do so would be, if it's a legal question as to the proper classification, that would be the remit of in the first instance, the State Administrative Tribunal, Western Australia, and conceivably it could be a court above that. So I can't tell you in point of fact where the law lies on that question, and in all fairness, neither can our lawyers, and in all fairness, neither can Mr. McQueen on behalf of his client.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. Okay, I have a mover and Councillor Kylie. Is anyone against? Oh, it's a seconder, sorry. A seconder, Councillor Congleton?
No, I'm opposing.
Okay, I'm asking for Councillor Kylie. You've got a seconder first off. Sorry, Councillor. Councillor Henderson, you're seconding that amendment? Okay. Now, Councillor Congleton, you've indicated you're against?
Yes, I am.
Okay. You wish to speak to that, Councillor Kylie?
Just briefly, if I could, councillors, you note that this was given to us late in the day today, but having read through this letter, I did concur with the interpretation of our local planning scheme in respect of this, and personally I believe that a residential aged care and community purpose building could in many respects be referred to in some ways as a hospital, having seen my mother reside in one, and the attention that they get is very near and bordering on being hospital-like. But ultimately this is not a decision for us to decide on and determine whether it's a hospital or not. This is a reason for refusal that I would like added in, and suggest we do add that in as a further means to refuse this application. So it's as simple as that. If we are wrong, if we have erred in our decision on whether it's a hospital or not, that's really not up to us. It's going to be up to the SAT. So I would ask you to put that in as a further reason. Thank you.
Councillor Henderson is a seconder.
Briefly, Mayor, and the reason I did second this is because there is no argument that's been put either side that gives us clear direction. It's in the middle. We have one says yes and one says no. So I think we should err on the safety side. in terms of the report on page 7, it refers to hospital and in the LPS 17, and it says places of lodge for medical treatment or care. And I thought when it says or, that made it quite clear to me that in this case residents would be going to the place at a time when they needed care, in other words hospitalisation, medication and the like. So in that respect I support Councillor Kiley's motion.
Speaker against the motion.
Question.
Councillor Congerton.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I'm happy with the council resolution as it sits in the moment, but I'm not happy to have an insert of clause 23, as it may be or may not be, and without a strong legal opinion telling me whether it is or it isn't. And I understand that Leven Legal is acting on behalf of a client, and maybe there's a structure within Leven Legal that their interpretation is a hospital, but it may not be the case from our lawyers or somebody else, so I can't accept it in there. Sorry.
Okay. Speaker Fort.
Question, Mr Mayor.
Question.
Mr Mayor, my question is whether we are, whether this is the right format for responding to a responsible authority recommendation. My understanding is that while we can endorse the responsible authority recommendation, we are adding our own additional council recommendation to the staff's recommendation rather than providing one joint recommendation. So my question is this the right way to go about it? And I also concur with what Councillor Congerton is saying, is that we actually need to write in there what clause 23 is, because I don't know what it is. So I just think the whole form of this is needs to be resolved. Can we get some advice on that?
Well, Mr CEO, who wants to say that? Mr Russell, maybe?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. To answer the first question, and this is relative to recent changes that the JDAP has implemented with respect to reporting arrangements from local government authorities to them as responsible authority reports. If you as a council, in considering this RA, make a recommendation different or altered to the recommendation that has been submitted from the staff, that recommendation, Mr Mayor, becomes the official recommendation to the JDAP. So that more recently now supersedes an officer recommendation. So what will be the recommendation to the JDAP will be the recommendation that this council makes. In the RA report, by contrast, there will be the staff recommendation, which is what I've provided to yourselves as councillors this evening. So that will be the recommendation. That's the first question in terms of what will go forward to the JDAP as the official recommendation. In relation to the second question as to whether this is the right format, I'll venture this opinion. As this council is not a decision-making authority on this application, and noting the matters raised around that we're dealing with a matter of legal opinion and contrasting legal opinions as to the proper classification of the application, you may, Mr Mayor, as a council, decide that that is a matter that properly the JDAP will apprise itself of. The JDAP no doubt will hear submissions from the applicants and their lawyer as to the proper classification of the use, and they will no doubt hear submissions from Mr Ukic's counsel, Mr McQueen, on the same. And I would imagine that the JDAP, in trying to form an opinion, will have the opinion of this council if it's different to the opinion of the staff. They may choose ultimately as the decision maker responsible for defending any decision. I expect, Mr Mayor, that they will get their own legal opinion. And properly, the JDAP ought to be bound by the advice that they receive on the application in the same way that the staff recommendation to you as a council is on the basis of the legal opinion it has received from our lawyers, McLeod's. Council, of course, is free to do as it sees fit, but if there's uncertainty, the council may well decide to leave that question properly to the JDAP to determine, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Russell. That's your question, Councillor Johnson.
Well, we're still not clear what clause 23 is, Mr Mayor. It actually ought to be in the minutes.
Well, Mr. Russell actually read it out.
Well, unfortunately, Mr. Russell read it out. I don't have a copy of it. The Minute Secretary doesn't have a copy of it, so she can't copy it in.
So, Mr. Russell?
Mr. Mayor, I think we should clarify the reference to clause 23, as per Councillor Kiley's request of me, is a reference to the clause in the Lavin submission. There's no such thing as we're not talking about a clause of the scheme. We're talking about the request made by Lavin to this council at clause 23 of the letter, as I've read out, to refuse the application for the additional reason that it is effectively a hospital. This application is a hospital, and so a use prohibited in the Swan Valley Rural Zone. You wouldn't, Mr Mayor, wish to reference clause 23. That would be an erroneous reference to an extraneous matter of a letter. It's the words at clause 23 of the Lavin letter that I think Lavin is requesting the council insert into the recommendation to go to the JDAP.
That's correct, and that's the words that Mr. Russell read out. Councillor Podolny.
Just a quick question, just to ensure that I've heard you clearly, Mr. Russell. You're saying that if we adopt this addition, it's going to somehow impact us voting on the RAR. Is that correct?
No.
Sorry, not voting, but it's going to almost supersede it. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr Mayor. The recommendation that this council resolves on this item will become the recommendation that goes into the responsible authority report to the JDAP. And so if you make a separate, different recommendation to that which the staff have advanced, that supersedes the staff recommendation and becomes the official responsible authority report recommendation to the JDAP.
Mayor, just a point of clarification. I didn't ask for it to supersede. I asked for it to be included in the officer's RAR report as an additional reason. That's my motion. Not to have it separate, but to be included as an additional reason.
Yeah. That's what Mr. Russell just said, that now supersedes his one because it's a change, so it changes his recommendation. At the end of the day, councillors, JDAP will make the decision. So, Speaker against motion, Councillor.
I just got one quick question.
Question.
Has staff, Mr. Russell, has staff reviewed and received and reviewed the legal advice and followed McLeod's advice?
Mr. Russell.
Hey, Mr Mayor, the city received very early in the piece from Lavin the submission to the effect of contending that this application ought to be classified as a hospital use. So, and that advice, in the nature of a submission from Lavin, was considered and responded to by our solicitors, McLeod's. So the answer emphatically is yes, Mr Mayor.
I'll speak against it, Mr Mayor.
Briefly, thank you.
Yeah, very quickly. I just wish to point out point 18 in the Lavian letter, councillors. Bearing in mind I've not seen the full version of this legal advice and relied only upon the above summary as contained in the RAR. Simply follow. My opinion is that we follow city staff advice because they reviewed all our legal advice. And if the council and if the other side want to argue it, then they can afterwards. But right now I'm going to support the current officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, given that we are not the decision-making body here, Councillor Kiley, I'll ask you to close. Thank you.
Thank you. And leading in from Councillor Parry's reference to the letter, there's, well, I won't go into. I'm basically going to say here we have a resident in the city of Swan who's employed a solicitor to look into this. I don't think we should deprive Mr Jukic of his opportunity to have his voice heard at SAT. I think we should back this point. As pointed out from staff, it's something that can be debated and dealt with at SAT. It shouldn't be, we're not the decision makers here. We are only putting forward a recommendation. This is simply to add in another reason why it's potentially, and I say potentially because it's not yet proven or decided upon, that it should be a reason why we reject this application. So I'm asking you to include it and let it be dealt with at SAT. It's as simple as that.
Mr Mayor, point of order. It's not SAT, Mr Mayor.
It's JDAP.
JDAP.
JDAP, thank you.
Okay. Those in favour? Of Councillor Johnson, Councillor Kiley, Councillor Henderson and Councillor Richardson. The rest are against. The motion is lost. Move the officer's recommendation. Moved Councillor Congleton. I seconder. Councillor Jones. Those against? No one. Declare that carried. Now go to 4.6. We've just done that one. Carry on. 4.8 is the proposed outbuilding shed at lot number 5505, number 29, Olswater Chase, Averley. Councillor Brodovnik.
My motion is that Council resolve to defer voting on the development application for a proposed shed at lot 5505 or number 29 Olswater Close, Averley, to give the neighbours who have requested a deferral more time to respond and discuss concerns with planning staff. 2, to enable the applicant time to submit details as to any intended crossover treatment to George Street associated with the use of the shed as a garage. 3, extend the public comment period by 21 days. 4, ensure this matter comes back to Council at the January 2021 Ordinary Council meeting. The reason? The neighbours have asked for more time to comment on this application, and the applicant has agreed to their request for a deferral, with the understanding this will come to the January Council meeting. There's also no plan submitted for a crossover, and Council do not have the complete picture of what is ultimately being required by the applicant.
Have a seconder. Councillor Henderson. Is there anyone against? Councillor Congleton. Councillor Brodovnik, you can open your debate.
Okay, so last week, 2 Averley residents came to this council asking for a deferral. One has a background in compliance, and they both want more time to discuss issues they have identified, particularly as the sketch shown to the neighbour is different to what was handed into the city. They particularly want to discuss their concerns with planning staff, and I think that discussion will be a helpful one to have. The applicant has agreed to the extension. I phoned him and he was fine with supporting it. I'm asking Council to also support this short deferral. I ask Council to support this deferral because it will ultimately foster and strengthen good neighbourly relations.
Okay. Seconder, Councillor Henderson.
Councillors, where there's doubt, we traditionally allow time for matters to be reconsidered and looked at. I think we should give the applicant and the neighbours that opportunity now.
Councillor Congleton, speaker against the motion. Any speakers for the motion? Okay, I'll rise on this occasion to speak. I too spoke to the applicant on this occasion last night, and it was clear to me that he was actually a little bit unaware of the process. So I spoke to him and gave him the details listed here on page 378, which talks about the different provisions of the deemed to comply. First and foremost, that the size of the shed was not to exceed 60 metres, and this one comes in at 33.44, so it's compliant. The peak roof height's not to exceed 4.2 metres, but it comes in at 3.12, so it's compliant. Setbacks from the primary street are to be in excess of 2 metres, and this is at 3.55, so it complies. Setback from the rear boundary is to be no less than 1 metre, and this is at 12 metres. The only issues that are to be considered here are the wall height at 2.65 to something that should be no more than 2.4. A distance and an area of 250 mil. About that much, councillors, give or take. And from the side boundary at 650 mil. Almost barely noticeable, those differences. But I will point out that within eyesight of this building is a case of precedence for a larger shed being built at number 32 Netherton Way, within eyesight. This shed currently has a framework up including a mezzanine floor and a similar setback from the front and side boundary, and is currently under construction. So there is precedent. Speaking to the applicant, while I agree, a very nice fellow, he was more than happy for us to move that along, and he explained to me that his relationship with his neighbours has all been good. One of the issues raised here was a shadowing concern. Councillors, you may have noticed on the map, this shed faces from front to back, east-west. So it follows the sun. So depending on the time of the year, there will be very little overshadowing most of the time because the sun will follow the path of the shed. So it's a minimal concern when we're talking about 250 mil, councillors, above a fence. This is nothing more than deferring something for people to do something they should have already done. The applicant was not aware of the process, which is unfortunate. However, the neighbours had the opportunity to comment, and they did so. They had the opportunity to raise questions. So I wonder what possibly more they can ask. Councillors, deferring something as simple as this shed, when there is precedence within eyesight, is nothing more than delaying a process for this gentleman to get on with his construction. I ask you to not support the deferral. Thank you.
Can I ask from maybe staff, do we have any indication whatsoever, given that this shed is to be used to house a vehicle, whether there's going to be a crossover application put forward or at a later stage, or is one required at all?
Mr Russell, is there a requirement?
It's an interesting question, Mr Mayor. I'm not as to whether or not you may have effectively an area you're going to be driving across. Probably the answer to that I might defer to my colleague, Mr Caton, but it's in relation to the second part of the question. Is the proponent the proponent is very clear it is for the garaging of a vehicle. So unless the vehicle is going to sit there and never be used, if he's proposing for it to come and go, yes, sensibly, we can expect a crossover application to come in.
Mr Coates?
Yes, I can't add much more than what Mr Russell has said. If the vehicle is going to be remaining there and not going over, then it wouldn't need a crossover. Presumably, if it is going to be driving in and out, then you would expect an application.
So, Mr Foley, you had a comment?
That normally the crossovers are part of the building licence application, and that's where they're normally shown on the plan, Mr Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Further question, Councillor Coley?
Well, I'm just asking, is it unreasonable that we expect the whole application to come in as one, given that he's going to be pushing a vehicle over the footpath and the verge? So I don't see any problem with deferring it until we get that information.
Okay, well, it wasn't a question. Okay. Right. Any further speaker for the motion? Speakers against? Councillor Johnson.
Just one brief point, Mr Mayor. I think the point that Councillor Prodovnik has made, that everybody's happy, the owner, the proponent is happy to defer so that he can discuss this with his neighbours, and it's in the interest of good neighbourly relations. Now, I heard you say, Mr Mayor, that the proponent believes he has got good relations with his neighbours, but he might not have if everybody thinks that this is going to be deferred until January and suddenly it goes ahead. So I think, although, Mr Mayor, the points you've made are quite reasonable, this is actually only a shed and it's entirely reasonable, if the proponent doesn't mind delaying, and who knows, he might not want to go ahead with his shed now that he's got a 2-week-old baby, his wife might not want the construction activity next door waking the child up. I don't see any harm in deferring this, because I think it
As indicated, you were speaking against the motion.
No, I'm in favour of the deferment, Mr Mayor.
Clarify that. Thank you.
Okay. So I see no reason why it shouldn't be deferred. I think it will keep everybody happy and no one's objecting. Okay. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Any further speakers? Councillor Prodovnik, you can close.
I just want to mention a couple of things. You, Council, the Mayor, actually mentioned what more can they ask, and there's only 250 mils. The neighbour that turned up last week was very clear that there were quite a few compliance issues that he wanted to discuss, and he gave me the strong indication that he would be coming back with a very comprehensive report for Council to consider. So it wasn't just a couple of issues, it was quite a comprehensive report that he wanted to do a bit of research on and come back with. So you ask a fair question, which is what's the problem, but I'm confident if we can give this man a deferral, he'll answer that question in a lot more detail. So I would ask Council to give him the opportunity to answer your questions, please.
Okay. Put the vote. Those in favour? For Councillor Richardson, Councillor Henderson, Councillor Lucas, Councillor Catalano, Coley, Zanino, Johnson and Prodovnik. The rest are against. That's 1, 2. Those are in favour of the motion. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Motion's carried. 8, 6. Okay. We now go to item 4.10, proposed home business at Lot 5, number 171 George Street West, and Councillor Zanino.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, I rise to move that the Council resolve to 1. Refuse the application made for the land use activity proposed at Lot 5, number 171 George Street, West Swan, for the following reason. 1. The application proposes the retailing of goods that will be kept on the premises, cannot therefore be considered a home business as defined under the City's Local Planning Scheme number 17, and properly must be classified as a shop which is a use not permitted within the Swan Valley rural zoning applicable to the land.
Seconder. Councillor Catalano. Is there anyone against? Councillor Coley. Wish to debate it?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Zanino.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, I'm going to be fairly brief. Just before I say, I'd just like to make a point that this motion was basically made, or I specifically asked Mr Philip Russell to get legal advice from McLeod's, because I didn't want this item, if it was appealed, to make sure that we were happy that we could defend it, and McLeod's actually more or less oversaw the drafting of my motion. So, councillors, the application for the home business is in the heart of the Swan Valley, predominantly Area B of the Swan Valley Planning Act. The subject land is zoned Swan Valley Rural under the City of Swan's Planning Scheme number 17, or LPS 17. The scope of the business is not believed to fall within the parameters of a home business. Councillors, this is a retailing business where the applicant buys and sells. He buys and sells goods and can be classified as a shop. The classification of a shop is a use not permitted within the Swan Valley rural zone. And I'd just like to say that the applicant has basically carried out this business for many years, and he's got away with it. And if he does get the approval for a home business, he will continue buying and selling, and that is not classified as a home business. It is a shop, and therefore the applicant, if he wanted to proceed along those lines, he would have to get a scheme amendment. So, councillors, I urge you to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. Councillor Catalano is the seconder.
Yes, thank you. Home business in the Swan Valley, I think common sense principles might apply, that we'd be talking about the kind of appropriate cottage industries that one would expect, craft or to do with, edible foods and fruits and vegetables, and that is in keeping with Swan Valley as a tourist destination and as a rural and food growing area, which is what we've discussed in this council so many times before, and that's what we also have agreed to protect. And actually, I'd like to see that protected as well. And I think that home business, in my mind, and probably in most people's mind, in the context of the Swan Valley, means this type of cottage industry. What we heard from surrounding residents last week was that it's almost bordering on light industrial activities taking place. In fact, wrecking of aircraft, so maybe we're even talking about wrecking activities, lots of noise and nuisance going on with moving these huge objects around, including demountable and big items scattered throughout the block. This is not, I believe, what is envisaged as a home business suitable or appropriate for the Swan Valley. And I think that you can get technical about definitions, but at the end of the day, definitions have to relate to the context in which they're placed as well. It's not just a black and white thing, it's actually about what is, that definition in context. And we're talking about the Swan Valley. It is a very special place and it does need to be protected. Thank you.
Councillor Kiley, Speaker against the motion.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, this is an opportunity for us to put some controls around what's actually occurring on this property. And I note Councillor Catalano's comments about it being almost light industrial with huge implements being moved around and forklifts and the like, and that was presented to us by during the deputations. But this is an opportunity for us to defer this item, and that's I foreshadow that I will be putting up a motion if Councillor Zanino's motion fails, that I would foreshadow a deferment of this for a month, simple month, to put this aside and allow an opportunity to see what controls we can put around this, because as Councillor Zanino pointed out, this has been going on for years. This applicant is more than likely going to continue with what he does, even if there is a refusal here tonight. It just seems clear. We just get some people in the community who want to do this sort of thing, and it's clear that they've been doing it for some years now. So rather than just saying no and ending up in the SAT situation, I would suggest that we defer it for a month and look further into what are the what's the terminology for a shop? Is it applicable to this business? Because my discussions were somewhat different to Councillor Zanino's. My discussions with Mr Russell today were somewhat different to Councillor Zanino's, in that one point could potentially be argued that it was a shop, but on the other hand, it could just be argued that it's a home business and fully compliant with their local planning scheme. So I really want this month to basically go and get this clarified. This is really an opportunity to put some controls around what this gentleman does on his property. Be aware that we're not talking about a light industrial home business here. We're talking about a gentleman who wants to put an area of a shed, a particular shed, probably half the size of this council chamber, aside to put electronics goods in, little boxes as he showed. Now, Councillor Catalano mentioned that it's not crafty, but this might be the craft of the 21st century in electronics. It's the future craft that we have and we have to deal with. Our local planning scheme was developed at a time when we didn't have an understanding of home-based business and internet ordering and the like. And I think if we can put some constraints around this business, we can allow this gentleman or this applicant to concentrate on what he does, not extend into light industrial and a whole range of other things. If we can give this applicant certainty around what he is doing with his business, there might be an opportunity for him to focus on doing that business in a smaller area of a shed, and let's put some controls around it. We can look at potentially just approving it for maybe a few years and seeing how it goes, and that might be something we look into. But I'm really asking for the month deferment for the likes of Councillor Zanino, Councillor Henderson, to have some input into what potential controls we could put in place to ensure that this business, this applicant, does not affect the neighbours as has been going on in the past. Be aware that my intention is exactly the same as Councillor Zanino's, is to protect the neighbouring properties and their right to enjoy the Swan Valley just as much as this applicant. But I think the best way to go is to look at what options we've got to control this business. I mean, we approve the likes of yoga studios, electronics, electricians' sheds, fitness studios as home businesses. These sort of businesses involve people moving in and out of the property on a daily basis. We can put controls in on this property where no no customers come to the property whatsoever. Maybe a courier van once a day. So there's other home businesses which have far greater impact on the surrounding community, but we're, compared to a yoga studio or electrician's shed or a fitness studio or the like. So let's just have a month where we can go and look at the applicability of it being a shop or not under local planning scheme, and then get some clarification around what restrictions we could put in place to actually contain what this gentleman does, allow him to focus on this business alone instead of branching off into other sales areas. There's an opportunity, for example, to restrict this business to only advertise things that are maintained in that shed, not advertise things that are sitting around the property, for example. These are restrictions that I don't know if that's at all possible. I really need to seek further advice on that. So I'm wanting the opportunity just to look at this to see how we could move forward. It might be that we can't. We might not get the constraints around this business.
Councillor Kiley, that's your 5 minutes.
So please vote for the deferment. It's just a month.
Speaker for the motion. Question, Councillor Richardson.
Just like to clarify what signage, or if there was or wasn't any signage regarding this home business.
Up to us, councillor, what we allow.
Question, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Lucas.
Through you to the relevant officer, in the reason to refuse from Councillor Zanino's motion, it states that the retailing of goods that will be kept on the premise cannot therefore be considered to be a home business, and under the city's local planning scheme 17 must properly be classified as a shop, which is not permitted use. I'm just ask if that can be clarified or confirmed, which will make my decision easy.
Mr Russell.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, it might be the opportunity to clarify a couple of matters. It is open to the council to take the position that this is a shop because it entails retailing, albeit retailing, as Councillor Kiley has noted, over the internet, where it may well be the purchasers of the goods don't come to the premises. It's the motion I drafted for Councillor Zanino on to refuse this on the basis that it's a shop is not something that has had legal input. To clarify, what I clarified with our solicitors is that the position and discussions in the mediation and the SAT around the classification of this proposal, and we looked and considered closely the matter as to whether or not online retailing where no customers come to the premises is or isn't retail with respect to this definition in Scheme 17, that the mere fact that that was discussed doesn't preclude, if the council adopts Councillor Zanino's motion of refusal, does not preclude our solicitors from defending that position. I think it's important to clarify it's not, and relating this to the Deputy Mayor's question, it does not mean that that is the professional opinion in the classification question of this application. It's merely that our solicitors can argue the point that by virtue of there being retailing over the online, that it is a shop. But and salient back to the issues we were talking about previously around the retirement village, that is a legal question, and as far as I'm aware, and this was discussed in the SAT, there is no case law precedent that we could come up with in the discussions to say that online retailing from a premises makes you a shop. So it may well be a new piece of law, Mr Mayor. I can obtain, if it's the decision of the council around a deferral, an opinion from McLeod, and that can come back. But what is in front of you should not be taken as being the legal opinion of our solicitors. It was drafted for me in response to Councillor Zanino's request that you could argue alternatively that this is a shop, and you can do that, but it's not to say that that is necessarily the opinion of our lawyers.
Councillor Lucas. Okay. Speaker against the motion.
Further question, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Johnson.
A simplified version of that question. Is it correct that a home business cannot carry stock? So through you, Mr Mayor, to Mr Russell.
Mr Russell?
It doesn't say that. There's nothing in the definition that says that. The definition says that you shan't retail goods.
Just to clarify that, so the definition of a home business is that you shall not retail goods. Is that right?
The definition, yeah, the definition includes in it no retailing from the premises.
Thank you.
Page 401, Councillor. Okay. Speaker for the motion? Any further speakers against? Councillors, and then I'll ask you to close. In 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, just quickly, there's a couple of points that Councillor Kylie made. That was he wants it deferred so that we can put controls on the property. Now, councillors, I think you're all aware that this applicant has been dealing from the property for many, many years, for over a decade, and he's caused many problems, and it's caused one of the immediate neighbours to go to court, and also he's gone to the Ombudsman, and this council has correspondence from the Ombudsman with regard to this situation. As the Mayor said, if you have a look at page 401, item D, it categorically states, does not involve the retail sale, display or hire of goods of any nature, and that's the home business and the meaning of home business. Now, he's categorically, carried on a business which is basically retail. Now, the question is, and I'd like to ask a question of Mr. Philip Russell, and that is, if he gets this approval and he continues to...
Sorry, point of order. This is wrap up. I don't believe it's time for questions.
Yeah, it is. I concur with your point of order.
Okay.
Councillor, thank you.
Well, what I will say is, councillors, if he gets the approval and he carries on this supposed home business and he continues to bring on pieces of machinery, heavy machinery, he's got planes and he's got all sorts of stuff there at the moment, and he's basically claiming that they're not for sale, they're his own personal items. So if he continues to bring items on the property and just stores them on the property, and compliance officer goes out there and says, well, hang on, and he just says, well, sorry, this is my own personal item, it's not for sale, you can't do a thing to him. You can't touch him. Because legally, once he accumulates, once again, because he, as he stated in his deputation, he's been working 12 months to get rid of the stuff. And he was requested another 4 months. That tells you the amount of stuff that he's accumulated. And he will accumulate that once again, because the past performance will tell you what the future will be. Councillors, enough is enough. This has to be put to rest, and I urge you to support this refusal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zena. Those in favour? Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12 to 2. Those against are Councillor Kylie and Councillor Parry. Now, councillors, we move to item 5.1, the dual use path, Westland Road, Bellas, proposed tree removal, page 416 of your agenda, and Councillor Henderson.
Thank you, Mayor. Sorry, I'm just skipping through pages. I move that Council resolve to 1, not proceed with the construction of a shared use path along West Swan Road between Millhouse Road and Great Northern Highway. The reason for changing the staff recommendation is that the removal of marrow trees is unacceptable to the community. In addition, this section of road may ultimately be increased to 4 lanes, although the detailed planning for this work has not yet been undertaken. It is premature to construct a dual-use path along this section of road until further planning has been undertaken to confirm the ultimate alignment. An alternate bike route has been identified in item 13.5 of today's meeting.
Seconder? Councillor Catalano. Is anyone against? There is. Wish to debate it? Okay. You do? Okay. Okay, so I'll put a debate. Those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. The motion is carried. Those against were myself, Councillor McCulloch, Councillor Zanino and Councillor Lucas. We now move to item 8.1. Thank you, Councillor Parry. Can I have a mover, councillors, for item 8.1 as per the report?
What's the recommendation, Mr Mayor?
It's in the report, councillor. Councillor Kiley, do I have a seconder? Councillors, do I need 5 minutes for you all to catch up? Thank you. Councillor Zena Seneca. Anyone against? Declare it carried. Thank you. We're now going to recall Councillor Parry.
What did we do? We just included it in the minutes.
Yeah, well, Councillor Parry left the room, so we had to actually move it as an item. If Councillor Parry hadn't declared a financial, it would have been moved in bulk. So you just moved it. Okay, that takes us to part C, and C 1.1 is Councillor Johnson. Councillor, I will ask, given that this is already being implemented by city staff currently, I question the need for this motion.
Yeah, look, Mr Mayor. Yeah, look, Mr Mayor, it's my motion, and councillors, you'll be pleased to know I'm going to withdraw it because the state government has picked up on this, the staff have picked up on it, so they obviously know a good motion when they see one, so there's no need for it. Thank you.
Okay, councillors, that withdrawn. That takes us to C 1.2 is Councillor Johnson policy. Councillor membership of incorporated associations funded by the City of Swan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm pretty sure this one will be taken up by the state government as well. It's a really good one. This is future legislation, councillors. Look, my motion is that council resolve to request the CEO prepare a policy by March 2021 for council about councillors' board membership of incorporated associations that are funded by the city. The policy to include consideration of the amount and purpose of the city funding, the degree to which the incorporated association is dependent on city funding, whether the incorporated association is open to public membership, whether the ordinary meetings and annual general meetings are open to the public, reporting of accounts and annual reports to council, the degree of connection between member councillors' wards and the incorporated association, councillors holding office bearer positions, whether membership is open to any councillor who wishes to join, the permissibility and degree of involvement of members of political parties, the permissibility of such an incorporated association's involvement in election activities, and K, any legal constraints that may be relevant. And the reason for the motion is to establish a clear and unequivocal public city policy on this subject. Thank you, Mr.
Seconder? No seconder. The motion fails. Councillors, that brings us now to confidential items. I need a motion to go behind closed doors. Move Councillor Parry, second to Councillor Lucas. Turn the streaming off. Danica, thank you.